Hello chess friends, and welcome to Yazadov's chess channel, and welcome to the Computer Chess Championship Test Run Tournament. It's sort of a tournament in which all of the best engines are playing and they're getting tested for some more and more important events. So again, Stockfish NNUE is brutalizing everyone else, but that's not the point. I wanted to show really one game from this tournament. I really didn't want to cover the whole tournament because it isn't so important. Now the TCE season 20 has started, but still the TCE is now in the first division stage. So Stockfish NNUE and Lila C0 and all these other engines are not playing. They're waiting these other engines to move up to the Premier Division. When the Premier Division starts, then we're analyzing some more Stockfish games. So let's check out now this game, because I think it had really great strategical elements. It had this defensive strategy, this parallel setup of pawns. I've talked about this idea. I've explain you, of course, what's the idea about this defensive strategy, but I'll explain you also how to break this defensive strategy. It's a very instructive game. I think that Stockfish has played here. Breaking this kind of a pawn structure is really hard sometimes, because you have to sacrifice a piece in order to make that happen. So it's really one of the most instructive chess games that I've seen. So let's check out now the game. As usual in the stop engine games, we have the sound, round 1, and fight, of course. So knight to f3 played by Stockfish and NNUE. Ethereal played here knight to f6, g3. We have b6, bishop to g2, bishop to g7. We have castling, and now e6. Here d3 going into a King's Indian attack, d3 e4, then knight to e1, f4, f5, g4 if the position allows it, really breaking the position on the king side. Here bishop to e7 was played. Now we have e4, and now d6. So till this particular moment the game was prearranged. I think so far this test tournament was very good. Many great openings have been played, so they haven't played this irregular, bad and dubious opening so far. So I think if you want to study chess more, you can also check out the whole Computer Chess Championship. Really great games have been played, but really I decided to show this one because it was strategically very good. So here after the move d6, Stockfish goes now with the move c4, and this is a very aggressive approach. It is, of course, controlling the d5 square, but the problem about this kind of pawn structures when you build d3, e4, c4 setup is this weak d4 square. So maybe black could build something like c5 and then knight to c6, and then maybe cement one of his minor pieces on the square d4, because a potential outpost cannot be kicked away anymore by some pawns, because you have already advanced your c pawn and you have also advanced your e4 pawn. Here in the game, castling was played. In the game, knight to e1 played by Stockfish and NNUE. If you try d5, this wasn't played in the game, but it's not so good. If you try to break the position here around the square d5, it's not the point that you don't have enough protection of the d5 square, but the problem is this one. We can take c takes d5. After e takes d5, we'll simply pass through now with our pawn. e5 after something like knight to d7, we have f4, and we are storming with our pawns towards black's king. We have a 4 versus 3 situation here on the king side. I think from this point on, white could have a comfortable game. So after the move knight to e1, queen to e8 was played. We have f4 anyway by Stockfish and NNUE, really storming towards the king side immediately. We have a6, and now g4. Stockfish is not losing any time, create this enormous pressure on the king side. We have the c5 by Ethereal. As I said, we want to play this powerful outpost maybe on d4, and also attack the queen side further with b5. So here g5, immediately attacking the knight to d7, and now knight to c3, protecting further the d5 square. But as I said, I don't think that this game is built around the square d5. I think now that Stockfish has to protect somehow the queen side, but also attack further the king side. I don't think that anyone will push the pawns in the center. Basically, it's an opposite side attack game. If you're familiar with the common strategies, most of the times this opposite side attack game happens when the kings are castled on opposite sides. But that's not the case here. But still, we will have an opposite side attack game, because you see the pawns are always showing us the direction of the attack. So it's obvious that black has to make progress here on the queen side. So in the game knight to c6, we have h4. You see Stockfish is continuing his pawn storm. Here b5, we have knight to c2. if you take maybe knight to b5, 8x b5, knight to b5, but then I think knight to b4 could happen. This is a very aggressive line. The knight is a little bit loose here on the board. If you try a3 to kick away the knight, maybe we can also counterattack this knight. You have to again get back. Maybe now a d5 pawn breakthrough motif could be possible, but as I said, still a risky choice. Stockfish didn't react here, didn't take the pawn, simply played knight to c2, improving the position of his knight, and here b4. Okay, this is a expanding move. Here black has of course the attack on the king, on the queen side, but now after knight to e2 we come now to the first part of our strategy. That's what I meant about this parallel setup. We have now 2 versus 2 situation here, so whatever black does, for instance, if black manages to somehow get this pawn to a3, we'll simply pass through to b3. If b3 then happens, they will simply pass with our a pawn. So that's why this parallel setup, when we have this 2 versus 2 situation, is a very good strategy to defend on that side where you're weaker. It's obvious that white is weaker on the queen side, because black has here the space advantage, because black has already advanced the pawn on b4. And as I said, if we have this parallel setup and if we want to break somehow the position, let's imagine now the pawn here on a4. If you want to break the position somehow, a piece sacrifice is necessary to get these pawns rolling again. So that's why it's better to be white here, because white has still the flexibility here on the king side to create some kind of an expansion, to create some kind of an open attack. And even if you sacrifice a piece here on the queen side and create some dynamics with your pawns, it's not a problem because we don't have the king here, so the king wouldn't be endangered. So it's better to attack on that side where your opponent's king is, and that's why I think white has already decisive strategical advantage. And of course, when Stockfish has a strategical advantage, then Stockfish will find its tactics. Stockfish will find a way to materialize this idea. So queen to d8 played by Ethereal. We have queen to e1. We're maneuvering the queen towards the king side. We want to get the queen to g3 and then slowly maneuver all of our pieces to the right side, to the king side, and then continue our storm with our pawn. So a5, you see now the problems. Black cannot create dynamics anymore because of this 2 versus 2 situation on the queen side. Here queen to g3, we have king to h8, getting out of the range of the king, because in some occasions there could be some tactical threats on the g file. Bishop to d2, queen to c7, and now rook to f2. We have f5. Here Ethereal finds also a nice defensive setup, because if you take e takes f5, still e takes f5, and again we would have, I think, a very passive setup. I don't think that white could find immediately attacking possibilities in the game. After the move f5, Stockfish continues now with the move h5, and we have now come to the other problem of the game. Again, we have a 2 versus 2 situation on the king side. So in the game, knight to b6 was played, and that's the problem of this parallel setup. If you try h6, then black will pass through simply with the move g6. If you try g6, then black will pass through with the move h6. And as I said, in order to break the position somehow, a piece sacrifice is always necessary. So you see, white and black have balance now on the queen side and a little bit on the king side, but still the only dynamics can, I think, happen only now in the center of the board. But in the game, Stockfish plays now a very interesting idea: knight to e3. Stays now with this, pieces like this. He wants still to attack the king side here with g6 or h6, but in order to split the pawn structure, you have to sacrifice a piece. So that's why I really love this game, how to break this parallel setup. Really great attacking formation here by Stockfish. Rook from a to e8, we have rook to e1, we have queen to d7, and now bishop to c1, a4, and now b3. That's now our goal, to break, to stop black's progress on the queen side. We have a3, and although black has now an advanced pawn even on the 3rd rank, the pawn structure is simply too blocked out on the queen side. I don't think that black can create further dynamics. Now basically it's a one-way ticket. We're playing only on the king side, where of course Stockfish is slightly better because we have now both of these pawns, both of these advanced pawns on the king side, and now strategically Stockfish is much better. So here bishop to f3, we have bishop to d8, and now queen to h3, we have knight to c8. Now black is trying to maneuver all of the pieces towards the king side because Ethereal realized that Stockfish is attacking now with all of his pieces. You see all of these pieces are basically aiming towards the king side. These two bishops, these two knights can always be remaneuvered to the king side. These rooks can be remaneuvered to the king side, so that's why you have to bring also your defensive pieces towards your king in order to defend this position somehow. So knight to g2, we have knight to g7, knight to e7, we have knight to h4, and now bishop to the king to g8, bishop to e3, bishop to c8, and now bishop to g2, queen to c7, and now knight to g3. F takes e4, we have bishop to e4, and now d5. And here comes really the critical moment of the game. Stockfish is challenged. Ethereal found a nice pawn breaking motif, and you can guess what Stockfish does. Stockfish plays really a monster move, plays the move bishop to g6. As I said, we want to break this parallel setup, we want to create dynamics, and here in the game Ethereal took with the knight takes g6. Even if you try f takes g6 here, then h takes g6 can happen. This pawn is protected, and what we want to do is then to play rook to h2, remaneuver the knight somewhere, and deliver checkmate. So it's a really nasty threat that Stockfish has prepared here. So that's why here knight takes g6 was played. We have h takes g6, but now h6. Here Ethereal is trying to pass through, but it's not a parallel setup anymore. Now we can take out this pawn, and here after g takes h6, Stockfish played a very nice move, knight to f3, attacking the h6 pawn. The problem is now, if you try to defend this with the queen, then you get, I think, a very interesting move. C takes d5. You cannot take with the pawn. E takes d5. Your bishop is hanging. If you maneuver with the knight here to e7 towards the king side, then I think we can play d takes e6, and then simply continue with f5, and we would have three connected pawns on the king side. So that's why here, if you try to maneuver here the knight, then we can take out this pawn, and still it's a bad position. If you try for instance to take out the pawn, we can hide with our queen maybe to h5, but still your rook is hanging, your knight is hanging. The most important thing is when we take out the knight, the queen gets deflected from the defense of the h6, and then there are again new tactical threats for white. So very interesting position that Stockfish has created here. After the move knight to f3, here bishop to f6 was played, and now queen to h6. Simply sneaking with the queen to g7, and now queen to h1. Stockfish retreats. Stockfish doesn't want to trade off the pieces because when you're on the attacking side, you don't want to simplify positions. In the game, bishop to c3 was played, and now knight to h5, attacking the queen to h8, and now rook to h2, sacrificing the rook for the initiative. We have d takes e4, and now g7. Very cool move here by Stockfish and NNUE. Bishop to g7, and now king to f2. We want to bring this other rook into the game. In the game, bishop to h6 was played, but now rook to g1 is simply too much to handle, too much pressure here by the rooks. We have king to f7, knight to f6, very nice sacrifice, queen to f6, and now rook to h6 is winning immediately. You cannot escape with the king or with the queen somewhere, maybe to d8, then you get checkmated with rook to h7, queen to h6, and similar stuff. The king is too endangered, so that's why here Ethereal tried king to e7. And now we can first play this check, bishop to c5, king to d8, and it's time now finally to take the queen, rook to f6. We have rook to g7, getting use of the open g file, getting our rook on the 7th rank, which is the best way how to include actively a rook in a chess game. Here we have rook to f8, and now bishop takes f8. This is really now desperate play here by Ethereal. Simply maneuver the bishop to c5, knight to e7. Here we have a check, not a problem, but it's a forced checkmate sequence. Here nothing can be done before Ethereal, and after rook to e8 it was checkmate. You see, I didn't really want to show you this game from all of these tactics that could happen. It would be too complicated to explain every tiny little tactic that Stockfish has prepared. I think from a strategical point of view, this was very instructive, because we have seen on the queen side and on the king side this parallel setup. As I said, it's better when you're attacking, even if you have this parallel setup, it's better when you're attacking your opponent's king, because here on the queen side you saw that Ethereal attacked the queen side, but there are basically no clear threats. When we are attacking our opponent's king, there we have clear threats, and you saw how Stockfish broke the position with the move bishop to g6, finally got this pawns rolling and included then all of the pieces in the attack, and broke really this very important defensive strategy, this parallel setup. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. A very instructive chess game, a little bit different than we used to see by Stockfish NNUE. We have also always seen this tactical beauty style. I think this was a very nice strategical game. If you want to see strategical and tactical brilliancies like this, check out my commented chess games played by computers. Here's the link. And if you want to see the humans battling in their best chess games, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.